I wanted to post a little video. This is something I've never done before, and it's crappy that I choose a time when I've been bawling and I look so bad to post my first video. But I just wanted to talk to my friends and family about the last couple of weeks. I sense my white friends and family, which is most of my friends and family, getting a real sense of fatigue and getting tired of feeling uncomfortable about everything they've learned about the country and themselves and other people, the experiences of Black and brown people, and in the last few weeks. And I understand that discomfort. It's something that I wanted to push away a lot when I first had children of color in 2009. I've had children of color since 2009. And there were a lot of times when I just wanted to have this, let's just not see color attitude. We don't see color. Color doesn't matter. And it took me some time to realize that we are not at a place yet where we can say, I don't see color. We need to see color, because seeing color and celebrating these stories is how we overcome racism and how we overcome the situations of struggle that still exist in our country. And the reason I'm sad and upset is because what I've seen a lot on social media in the past few days is my white loved ones and friends being done with this. They're uncomfortable and they don't like the discomfort, and they feel that they have been asked by the media to choose. There's this false dichotomy set up that if you didn't already understand this, and if you don't understand it all right now, that you are a racist and that there's something wrong with you. And if you love your country, you're a racist. And if you don't see faults in this country, if they're not obvious to you, and if you're still learning, you're a racist. And it's this or that, and it's one or the other. And I want to say to all of you, it's okay. It's not one or the other. This is a false dichotomy, and you don't need to accept it. It's a spectrum. We can't, I like what Alex Ohanian talks about, Serena Williams' husband. It's a spectrum. We don't need to worry about whether we are racist or not racist. We just look at each individual act and say, is that an act of racism? Was that an act of racism? I can tell you acts of racism that I have committed. I'll tell you an example right now. When Latoya, my good friend Latoya from Flint, Michigan, and her family first moved here to Utah, she was very concerned about her kids, her teenage boys walking home at night from the rec center here in Bountiful. And I was like, oh, Latoya, Bountiful is so safe. There's nothing for you to worry about. I was sort of defensive of my great American city, Bountiful. I wanted her to feel so welcome. And I kept saying, oh, why are you worried? Why are you worried? And I didn't realize she's worried not about her kids getting kidnapped on their way home like I'm worried about. She's worried about the white neighbors calling the white police on her Black teenage boys. And frankly, she had reason to worry, because we have had other Black teenagers in our neighborhood that have been profiled by the police. And this is not an anti-police statement. I love the Bountiful Police. As I've posted on my blog, one of my best friend's husband is a wonderful police officer here in Davis County. And that's my point, that you don't have to be anti-police to support Black Lives Matter. You don't have to be anti-anything to be pro something else. That was an act of racism on my part. Latoya, instead of listening and trying to understand her fear and amplifying it and maybe saying, oh, let's take your boys down to introduce them to the police chief and introduce them and help you feel more comfortable, Latoya, I just immediately responded from my white point of view. And I didn't take a minute to try and hear what she was saying and hear what it was like from her point of view. That's a small act of racism on my part. Does that make me a racist? No. It's a small act of racism. It's a spectrum. We're all trying to move along, so we commit fewer of these acts of racism, and so we understand better when we are committing them, and we move in the right direction till we are all trying to be part of the effort to better understand each other's stories, to promote each other's stories. Another example that I wanted to give is like for your children at school. It's great if the school is really understanding and they're doing reports and they say to my Black children, oh, do you want to be Martin Luther King Jr. for your report? That's understanding, that's helpful, but that's 30 years ago understanding. What you can do as a white parent is you can say to your white children, would you like to be Martin Luther King? Would you like to be Harriet Tubman? Better yet, let's know some Black famous people beyond Martin Luther King Jr. and Harriet Tubman. Let's think of Black history as part of American history. Think how much more comfortable Black and brown students would feel if they felt like their white classmates cared and maybe wanted to be a Black person for their history report too, or for their marionette, or wanted to learn about them just as much. Black history is not just for Black students, and brown history is not just for brown students, and white history is not just for white students. Guess who Cyrus chose to be for his marionette this year? He chose to be Mr. Hershey because he loves Hershey bars and he wanted to learn about how Hershey bars were invented. And because he's a Black student, he can choose to be a white person for his marionette, for his history, and white students should be choosing and understanding Black history too. It should be all of our history. We need to elevate all of these stories. And I was so excited in the last couple of weeks to receive some emails and texts from people asking how they could understand better and how they could do better. And it's just been really disappointing to me in the last few days to see this fervor dying down, to see many of my loved ones getting so uncomfortable with the discomfort that they just didn't want to feel it anymore. And they wanted to find an explanation in a way to say, I don't have a problem. I'm not a racist. I love everybody. I am a Christ-like person. I don't judge anybody. I understand that. I'm not saying that any of you are. I'm telling you, I, as a mother of Black children, am still a person who has white privilege and who still commits acts of racism and still has a lot I need to understand. And that doesn't make me a bad person. That just makes me someone who has more to learn and more to understand. And it breaks my heart to see people giving up already because they are uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable for years because of the things I've seen my children go through. And I am white. I can bless my children with my white privilege if I'm worried about their safety at the park at night, or if I see children at the park treating them a certain way or saying their skin looks like poo, which yes, your children do say that to them. I can immediately go stand by them, or I can have my white husband go stand by them, and just them seeing that white parent will shut those kids up. I have that privilege that I can give to my children, and I know that a Black mother doesn't have that privilege. And so I know that my discomfort is so much less than a Black mother for her children. And my point is that I don't want anyone to feel bad. If your kids have told my kids their skin looks like poo, or even have used the N-word, because yes, they have been called the N-word at school, I know that that doesn't necessarily mean that kid comes from a racist home. It might just mean that kid comes from a home that is not anti-racist. If you've never discussed racism with your kids because you think it doesn't exist, and you've tried to act like, oh, we don't see color is not an issue, then your kid might go to school and they might think it doesn't hurt to use the N-word, or it doesn't hurt to tell someone their skin looks like poo, or it doesn't hurt to say, let's choose teams by skin color. So all the light-skinned kids are on one team and all the dark-skinned kids are on another team. Right now, we need to teach our kids to see color. We need to teach them to understand stories of color. We need to teach them to stand up for children of color, to use their privilege to help. We need to teach them to be interested in Black history so that the only Black kid in the class or the one or two brown kids in the class are not the only ones that might choose to do a report on a brown kid, on a brown famous person. What if a white student said, hey, I'd like to do my report on this person. Oh, look, all three of us are doing reports on people of color. How it's just the little things like that that make a difference. And like I said, if a child at school says something racist to my child, that doesn't make me think he has racist parents. It just makes me think maybe he has parents that are trying to pretend there's no racism in this world. And so those kids have not learned that these things can hurt because they are trying to pretend that color doesn't exist and that stories of color, that there is not discrimination. There is discrimination. We do need to right now elevate stories of color and elevate the differences that people experience. If you support Black Lives Matter, that just means you support Black Lives Matter too. It doesn't mean you don't support blue lives. It doesn't mean you don't support all lives. If you have acknowledged in the last few weeks that you have maybe a ways to go and some things to learn, and that maybe you do have some white privilege that you're aware of, that doesn't mean that you didn't have a hard childhood and you haven't had a lot of sacrifices and you aren't a wonderful person and you haven't been through a lot. If you don't like it, if you support Black Lives Matter, that doesn't mean you have to love it when people kneel down during the national anthem. If the national anthem means to you that you think of your ancestors who fought, like Drew Brees said, and you don't agree with the way people reacted to Drew Brees' comment, you don't have to agree with the way everyone reacts to everything. You just have to say to yourself, where am I on the spectrum? And which way? And am I teaching my children to be anti-racist? Am I moving toward being anti-racist? And am I teaching my children the same thing? If you say, I understand that there is systemic racism in this country, that doesn't mean that you are saying, I don't believe in this Constitution. I don't love this Constitution. I don't love this country. I am the epitome of that. I majored in American Studies. My favorite class in law school was con law. I am a flag-waving, country-loving, national anthem singing and crying American who also just ordered my Black Lives Matter sign and who also knows that there is systemic racism and wants so much to see this country that I love so much just become better and better itself. My really good friend Alicia, whose husband is a wonderful police officer, she invited my boys to come and play in his squad car so that they can for sure feel comfortable with police as they grow up and that they can know what a squad car is like and know what a kind police officer is like. Alicia understands, and I understand, that it is not a false dichotomy, or that it is a false dichotomy. It's not one or the other. And I'm just pleading with my white friends and family, don't give up. Understand that the discomfort you feel is okay. It's just part of the discomfort that people of color feel all the time. And that doesn't mean that your country isn't a wonderful country, or that they don't love your country, or that you don't have other kinds of discomfort. And it doesn't mean that you can't go on loving your country and seeing all the great things about it. And it doesn't mean that you're not a good person or a loving person. And it doesn't mean that all the good things you've already done in your life for people of color don't count. It just means we can do better. Believe we can do better. Care about doing better. Accept for yourself that we can do better. The last thing I want to say is to just share an example that really made an impact on me and helped me to understand this difference. Latoya's daughter, Tamaya, who is a really close friend of ours and has lived with us some on and off, she was telling me about when a civil rights investigation was done at the local high school. And she said, they called us in and they asked if we had experienced racism. And she said, you can always tell the children who have black parents and the children who have white parents. And I said, really? how can you tell? Because obviously I'm a white parent of black children and I want to be aware of these issues. And she said, when black children of black parents share the experiences of racism they have been through, they just share the experience. They say, this happened to me, this teacher said this to me, and they just acknowledge it. This is what happened to me, this is how I felt. When the children of white parents, the adopted children of white parents, because adoption is common in Utah, when they say an experience, they always feel pressure to jump to the white teacher or the white adult's defense. They will say, well, yeah, I mean, this teacher said this to me, or this teacher used me as an example of this, and it made me really uncomfortable, but I know she didn't mean it. I know she loves me. I know she didn't mean to make me uncomfortable. And Tamaya said, that's how you can always tell the child of a white parent, because their parents have taught them to be so quick to jump to the white person's defense. I have thought about that for so long, and I've thought about it so much. Everything those white parents have taught their children is true, right? For the most part, those teachers are loving and wonderful teachers. And I don't mean just teachers. It could be, I don't mean to harp on teachers. We have wonderful teachers. It could be an adult, it could be a boss, it could be someone in the neighborhood, whatever. But the point is that we are so afraid of our discomfort. We are so afraid of thinking of someone as having ill will, that we are more concerned about jumping to the white person's defense than we are about hearing the story of the black child or of the black person. And that's what this movement on social media right now is about, of elevating stories of people of color, of sharing them, of letting their voices be heard. That's what it's about. It's just elevating their stories, listening to them, supporting them. I can't think of the word right now because I'm so emotional. I can't think of it, but validating their stories. It doesn't mean that that teacher or that adult or that white parent or that white neighbor meant ill. These people do love these children, and they do, for the most part, not mean to make them uncomfortable. The point is that if that's the first thought we jump to is, oh, I need to defend the white person, that's our white sensibility needing to come to the front, needing to come to the fore to stop our discomfort. I had this situation just with my dad the other day, who was a wonderful and loving grandfather to all of his brown grandchildren. And I said something, an experience that a kid had in class, and he said, oh, I think the teacher really means well and is really trying to do her best and thinks she's being really nice there. And I said, I know, Dad, I'm not saying she's not. That's not the point. The point is not that these teachers aren't doing their best. The point is that we are uncomfortable. It made my dad uncomfortable that I said, this was not enough for my black child. We need to do better. This teacher needs to do better. I need to do better as a white mother. We all need to do better. It's okay to say you need to be better at something. It's okay to say our country, which is a wonderful country, can do better at things. It's okay to say our churches can do better at things, and our schools can do better at things. That doesn't insult what they are right now. When we jump right to that white defense, it's to alleviate our own discomfort. And so what the point of the last few weeks has been is to try and get us to stop jumping to alleviating that discomfort and instead to sit with it, so that when my black child comes home to me and says that someone at school told him that he looks like poo, that instead of just immediately saying, oh, well, they don't mean it, they love you, that I'm sure they really didn't mean it that way, I can sit in that discomfort and I can say, oh, I'm sorry, how did that make you feel? And we can talk about the history of where that comes from and other experiences that people of color have had, and what he might want to say back, and how he might educate that person. And then later, after I've had the very uncomfortable discussion with him where he was uncomfortable and I was uncomfortable and we acknowledged that it was all uncomfortable, I can say, you know, I think that friend probably really still likes you and loves you and maybe didn't realize how hurtful their comment was. And after you talk to them about it, maybe they'll understand better. But the point is that we sit in the discomfort. And what we're doing right now is we're doing exactly what those, as a country and as a white community and as friends and family, those of us that are getting weary of the discomfort, we're doing what those white parents do. White parents like me of children of color that Tamaya pointed out to me. We're jumping to the defense of our country and of our systems and of our constitutions and of our teachers to say, oh, that's not what we mean. That's not what the police mean. That's not what the police stand for. That's not what the Constitution stands for. That's not what this country stands for. We understand all of that. That's not what the Constitution stands for. That's not what good police officers stand for. That's not what most police officers stand for. That's not what this country stands for. And it's exactly because that's not what this country stands for. It's exactly because that's not what this country stands for that we have to acknowledge systemic racism, and we have to sit in our discomfort and ask what we can do better. Don't let anyone convince you that you have to choose whether you are a racist or whether you support Black Lives Matter or whether you support the Constitution or whether you support Black Lives Matter or whether you support this country or whether you love the national anthem or whether you support Black Lives Matter or whether you love your gun or whether you support or whether you admit that there's systemic racism. It's just a spectrum. We're all just people just trying to do better. We're just a country trying to do better. And the more we can sit with that discomfort and just acknowledge that there are people around us that are hurting and people around us in pain and people around us not being treated well, and that we want to make the most of this country and we want to make it better. And think how proud we can be if 10 years from now it is so much better. Think how proud we could be if 10 years now I can send Cyrus to college anywhere, any city in this country, and know that he will be safe and that I don't have to worry about him being shot on the street. Think what a triumph that would be and how proud we could all be of this country.